Paula, you've raised your hand. I'm not sure if that was intentional.
Just saying hello. Good morning. It's a good idea to give it a few minutes here and let people join in. See the numbers going up.
Good morning again. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give it another 30 seconds and then we'll jump into it. Okay, Paula, should we hop into it?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you again all for joining us this morning on our fourth and final workshop, topic focused workshop for the Washington Transportation Plan. This is focused on equity in transportation. I'm John Overman with Cambridge Systematics, the project manager supporting the Washington State Transportation Commission with this effort. And I'd like to introduce Paula Reeves with the commission, who's going to kick us off.
Good morning, all. Thank you for taking time for this discussion today. We just have some brief introduction slides with a little background for you, and then we'll get started on the most important part of the meeting, which is getting your thoughts through a polling mechanism, and we'll be sharing some information in the chat about how you join that. I have the pleasure of introducing the Transportation Commission to you all. They are an independent 7-member body. Each member is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state senate. We have 3 from the east of the mountains and 4 from the west. And the DOT secretary and governor's office representatives also serve on the commission as non-voting members. Next slide. Just a little bit about their role. So that you know the breadth of work they do. They propose transportation policy and finance recommendations. Oops, there.
Sorry about that.
No worries. They propose transportation policy and finance recommendations to the governor and the legislature, and that mostly happens through an annual report. They serve as a tolling authority, adopting state highway and bridge tolls and setting ferry fares for Washington State ferry system. They provide a public forum for transportation policy development, possibly the most important role. They hold 11 meetings each year across the state, getting input and information about transportation work going on across Washington. And they conduct special legislatively directed projects, and they serve as the author of Washington's 20-year statewide transportation plan, known as WTP. And this is not a plan for the state highway system. It is a statewide plan, including local, regional, and state transportation goals and policies. And with that, I will turn it over to John for a bit of background on this topic.
Thank you, Paula. So here's the overview of what we're going to talk about today. Paula's given us a welcome. We have some background slides to kind of kick off the conversation. Also, I'll be giving a very brief overview of the Washington Transportation Plan, why we're here today, and talk about some of the challenges around equity that we've heard about thus far. And the bulk of the discussion today will be in that gaps and solutions. So we have a couple featured guest speakers to kind of kick off that conversation, but really we want to hear from you all and to understand some of these key questions that we have. So just to kind of get us started today, we're using Zoom, as you can tell. If you haven't done so already, you can rename yourself by clicking on the participant icon and finding your name, click the three dots, and you can rename yourself, add your agency if you would like to. We do have Q&A and chat. If you can't see the Q&A, you may have to click on that more button. But we can use the chat to respond to what you're hearing from other participants in either verbally or what they're putting into the poll, which I'll talk about next. During the Q&A, or sorry, during the discussion, you can use your raise hand function. Again, it might be in the more, three dots in the more section, or just raise it physically. I should be able to see you. And finally, the meeting is going to be recorded. You'll be able to go to the site and re-listen to this one or some of the other sessions as well in the coming weeks. We're going to be using Mentimeter. So if this is your first workshop, this may be new to you. For the others, this is probably very familiar. And we're going to test this out right away. So if you can go to menti.com and enter this code, 85197612. I'm also going to drop a direct link in the chat, and we'll have the first poll question to a little icebreaker pop quiz question. So let me put that in the chat.
Please do join. It's anonymous, and we hope to gather your thoughts and feedback here.
This will be the same code and the same quiz for the entire discussion this morning. So kind of keep that browser open either on your phone or your desktop. So the question is, what percentage of the population in Washington State was non-white, so non-Hispanic? I should say non-Hispanic, not the parentheses, in 2010 and 2020. So is it 35% in 2010 and 42% in 2020, and so on. So you can see the answers are coming in on your live version of this. And I'll give you another 15 seconds or so to get your response in. All right, so with most of the votes counted, we have, oops. You know, 14, the majority of you, or the most of you got the answer right. It was 27% in 2020, and now it's up to 36% of the population in Washington State are non-white, non-Hispanic, non-white. One more poll question before we get into it. What is your affiliation? So please enter whether or not you're representing a public agency, either local or regional or state, if you're a member of the private sector or a nonprofit, if you're someone from the general public or other. All right, so keep those answers coming in. At the moment, we have the majority of you are from a local or regional public agency, quite a few from a state agency, and the rest from either nonprofits, private sector, or general public. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick overview of the Washington Transportation Plan. If you've listened to one of these sessions before, this will be repetitive. But for those of you who are new, as Paula mentioned, the WTP is a statewide transportation plan for all agencies, all jurisdictions, all modes. So it is not just for WashDOT. It's not just for a regional agency. It's really for all of us. This umbrella graphic is meant to be illustrative, to show the coverage of the plan, not to say that it's the most important plan, a transportation plan in the state. It really has to be a collection of the ideas, the best ideas from the different statewide plans, statewide efforts, regional, local plans that have a lot of the specific projects and the specific strategies that are important for the different regions. It does help meet Washington's or the state planning requirements as well as federal requirements. It is an important avenue for public engagement, and we're going to be doing more stakeholder engagement like this call, as well as public engagement in early 2025. And it's also a great opportunity for coordination, both between us and you all as representatives of different agencies, different jurisdictions at different levels of government. So good opportunity to collaborate and coordinate on these different topics. The fundamental building blocks of the WTP are the 6 statutory policy goals. So these goals were adopted in 2000 and are really the backbone of a lot of the transportation planning that happens in Washington State. So the goals are economic vitality, really ensuring that the transportation system promotes a prosperous economy, preservation to maintain and extend the life of our transportation assets, safety for both in terms of personal safety and security of the transportation system. We have mobility for both goods and people, the movement of goods and people, environment and health, focusing on the quality of life, as well as the natural environment. And finally, stewardship, making sure that we're making good use of our resources and that our transportation system is efficient. Safety and preservation are the 2 highest priorities in terms of the legislature at the moment. The last Washington Transportation Plan was adopted in 2018. So this is before the pandemic, and there have been a lot of notable legislative actions since 2018, as well as just emerging priorities and policies. So some of these are shown on the right side of the screen. This WTP update offers an opportunity for us to look at what's changed since 2018, to include some of these new ideas into our strategies that we'll be developing as part of this plan. I'll talk about the policy pillars on the next slide, really as an opportunity to connect the 6 statewide goals to some of these new and emerging priorities at the state level and the local level. So some of these, relevant to today, the HEAL Act obviously is very important in terms of equity, but also there's been new funding available for transportation. There's new, climate and resiliency and safety initiatives underway. So the policy pillars, again, these are meant to be an additional lens to support the 6 goals. So these are some of those emerging priorities that have come out of the state legislature, as well as other agencies throughout the state. We've held topic focused meetings on sustainable long-term funding, on climate and resiliency, on connecting communities, and now we're doing one on equity and transportation today. So the purpose of today's call is really to explore where the state is making progress with respect to equity, where the most important work is yet to be done, and what are some of the potential solutions to address these challenges. So we're at the point in this project where we've done some outreach in the spring, some engagement at the regional level around some of the challenges and opportunities. We're going to be developing recommendations or recommended strategies this fall, and so we're kind of in between those 2 efforts to really jumpstart that effort to develop new strategies for the Washington Transportation Plan right now. So I have a couple more slides that I'll present, and then we'll get into the heart of the discussion. So just a recap of what we heard from some of the regional sessions in April and May of this year. These are not by no means not everything that was shared during those meetings, but some of the kind of themes around the challenges and opportunities are highlighted here. And those that I've underlined and bolded, relate to equity. And really, equity can be sort of a cross-cutting theme for all of these issues. But some of those that may be more directly related to equity, affordability, workforce development, sort of the changing workforce, increased safety challenges, and certainly vulnerable users being a big part of that. So, but again, a lot of those challenges can relate to equity in different ways. Similarly with opportunities, there may be an equity lens for a lot of these different opportunities, but I've bolded some of those that really jumped out to me around collaboration, federal and state policy alignment, with some of the federal efforts in this space, a lot of the multimodal strategies and the and co-benefits around offering different options for different communities. So there is a lot of opportunity. There's still a lot of challenges, and we're gonna I think cover a lot of that today in some of the discussion. Just one quick slide on a report that we were reviewing, which is the self-sufficiency report that the University of Washington puts out. Just highlights how costs, and this is probably no news to anyone on the call, costs continue to rise, and there is an affordability crisis in Washington State and throughout the country. In 2019, it was 22% of the households that struggled to make ends meet. That's up to 28% in 2021. You can see that the chart on the right that this has fluctuated a bit over time. It was high in 2013 as well, but the kind of general trend is upward. That the costs of housing, of childcare, of food, healthcare, et cetera, continue to increase, and our wages are not keeping up with that. And transportation is a big piece of that. So how can we use the transportation plan to address some of these affordability issues? I'd also note that the number for Black and Latino household is 45% of the households that don't meet this self-sufficiency threshold in 2021. So there's also a racial disparity in these numbers. So with that, we're going to kind of move into the gaps and opportunities section. I have a couple more slides that I'll present, and then we're going to turn it over to a few guest speakers who are going to share their thoughts on what their agencies are doing, where they see some of the challenges, and some of the potential solutions that need the most attention. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit, this is by no means all of the types of equity strategies that we might consider for the Washington Transportation Plan. But as we start to talk about new strategies, new ideas, we can think of them in a couple buckets, and there are more than that, just these. But some ideas that came to mind for us, in terms of data analysis, defining what equity means in your community. Is it equity in the process? Is it equity in the outcomes? And is it an equitable? Are you focused on the population level or the household level? So there are lots of different ways to think about equity. Increasing transparency in the planning process, making sure that those decisions that are affecting communities are made available to those people who are impacted. Getting insight from community in your planning processes. Data disaggregation. So the slide I just showed, you might have a single number, but how does that break down in terms of race, income, other factors that might be important for your community? Funding and investment. So some sample strategies, targeting your investment to certain groups, certain areas. Having a more equitable allocation of funding, having flexibility in the funding for both the local jurisdictions or whatever jurisdiction is spending the money to invest it how they see fit, and also if there's a program that's focused on funding for communities, having the flexibility for it to be a kind of community-led investment rather than very prescriptive kind of top-down program. So those are just kind of some ideas. I want to also note that the previous WTP, the 2040, does have some strategies related to equity. It wasn't a goal. It wasn't even a cross-cutting theme back in 2018, but there are some of the strategies that address disparities in safety and access to essential services for differing racial or economic groups. So there's some progress that have, or at least some focus on the previous WTP, but there's a lot of work to be done for this plan. And I mentioned earlier the HEAL Act, but there's been a lot of work underway since 2018, and really excited to hear from you all about where you've seen the most progress in terms of advancing equity in Washington State transportation. So one final poll question before we turn it over to our guest speakers. So this is a question that we're asking you to do a ranked list of various ways that the state government might address equity in transportation, and realize that many of these are overlapping. This may be a difficult task to rank. So just kind of getting a quick pulse check on what you feel about these particular strategies of improving community engagement, enhancing general multimodal accessibility, increasing the equity analysis, the data that's available for equity analysis, improving actual equitable investment in transportation funds, targeted safety improvements for vulnerable populations, improving universal accessibility, so making sure that all transportation facilities are accessible to people with disability, for all users, enhancing workforce development. So this is a question you'll have to drag those different responses into the order and then click submit. So if you've joined us,
yep. Go ahead.
If you've joined us late, you can go to menti.com and enter 85197612, or visit the chat, and you should see a link there as well.
Your responses are anonymous. I encourage you to join.
All right, so another 10 seconds. So click submit if you haven't done so already. Okay, so keep your answers coming in if you haven't done so already. You can still do it on the live version, but I will show what we see currently: improving equitable funding or investment as the top. Generally enhancing multimodal accessibility is number 2, and so on. So thanks for the response. Definitely interested in kind of hearing some of the nuance when we get into the conversation later. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over to some representatives from different agencies that we've invited to talk today. We'll go from left to right. We'll start with the Yakima Valley Council or Conference of Governments. Alan Adolph is a regional transportation planner with YVCOG. Alan, are you with us? There you are. So yeah, take it away. Share your perspective from the Yakima region on these topics.
I'd like to kind of go back to 2018. It was about a year after I got here. And we're really in a different world now, in terms of our ability to outreach. In the previous administration of our agency, after I got here, for decisions that preceded me, were social medially averse. For whatever reasons they were. And COVID, I think, definitely jump-started our ability to figure out new ways to outreach. But it's definitely kind of transformed how we do business. We have outreach, specifically outreach staff for our agency now that we didn't have when the WTP was last updated in 18. We are looking at having our own transportation specific outreach coordinator. So engagement, we're really venturing out. We're doing podcasts now, looking at any and all different ways to reach out to the public. And that is especially important with our limited English proficiency populations. Since the 2020 census, a majority of Yakima County residents are minorities, mostly the Hispanic community, and our previous ability to engage them and have them share their needs and their desires in terms of transportation has always been limited, and we're still trying to build that and still work on that. So I think to kind of hit the progress, is not only has, I think, DOT been able to provide some best practices, willingness and abilities to partner with us on regional activities, but also kind of give us assistance and flexibility to kind of grow how we do some of our outreach. And we've even been loaning some of our outreach staff to our local South Central region for some of their activities to help improve outreach with our Hispanic residents. That's kind of like the standard conversation. Where I still always kind of bring back my oil to the squeaky wheel is benefiting our local jurisdictions will benefit our residents regardless of their demographics. And that's where I still look for equity improvements, whether that's at a legislative level or whether that's within the abilities of the DOT or the Transportation Commission. And that is how to ensure that our small communities, especially in economically depressed regions, have access to resources to improve their own accessibility in their own communities, whether that's transit, whether that's access to the other national modes, whether that's aviation, passenger rail, everything that's being discussed as an alternative to roads and highways, that being able to provide opportunities for even the smallest jurisdictions in our region to improve their accessibility is the areas that we still want to see improvement in, that I think we have seen significant investment by the legislature and the DOT over the last 5 or 6 years in either addressing that through grant opportunities, outreach opportunities, studies, plan updates, and kind of really hitting a new level of connectivity in a rural, isolated location. I can only speak to our rural areas. I can't speak to like the Puget Sound area where there's maybe a lot more opportunity, a lot more resources to reach out to various demographics. But rural Washington, I think is the new frontier of being able to engage the public and increase accessibility in all forms of transportation.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for joining us today. Okay, next we're going to turn to Cameron Steinbeck from Front and Centered. Cameron's the Climate Justice Program Manager. Front and Centered is a nonprofit coalition. So welcome, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you, John, for the invitation, and glad to be in conversation with all of you. So yeah, absolutely. Our coalition is made up of a group across Washington State, comprised of certain communities of color whose missions and members come together for equity, environmental, and climate justice. So we follow the leadership, the knowledge, and expertise of the communities of color across Washington State, and we work for and strive for a just transition, where frontline communities, of course, are at the forefront of building equitable, democratic systems of transformative environmental economic outcomes for everyone. So in preparation for joining this conversation, I had the thought of where is the state making progress. Of course, the plans in place are ambitious, and there's of course important metrics that we can keep track of. We at Front and Centered have of course focused on the agencies who are responsible for some of these things. WSDOT being one of the primary ones. Of course, it's not just not just WSDOT, but maybe the agencies that are responsible for many parts of this plan. So without taking too much time, I definitely want to allude to what our team has put together in the HEAL progress report and some of the criteria that we've put forward, and how we are looking at the state agencies and how they're working for not just those metrics for HEAL, but of course in the conversation we're having around equity in our transportation plans. And primary concern is how are we identifying communities who have, disproportionate environmental harm or health concerns. And we definitely want to continue to encourage and use the environmental health disparities map as a scorecard for identifying those communities that are overburdened already and how we prioritize the kind of transportation solutions that put equity first, that put justice first for our most overburdened communities, for the many people across the state who do not drive. And many of our investments continue to be focused on highway expansion. Some of our priorities in terms of what's going to bring about justice in transportation is, divestment from building and expanding highways in frontline communities. That's just going to commit us to increased greenhouse gases and increased pollutants in those overburdened communities. We need, continued actual standards to complete, missing, sidewalks and build back the public transportation network across the state. If we are going forward with equity with a justice-focused lens of who has been most left out, who's been most overburdened by the kind of investments that prioritize cars and polluting modes of transit, we can solve many problems. So we can have a better transportation system for everyone. And of course, last but not least, and something that is present in the plan as well, safety. When we're talking with our community members, one of the first things to talk about is safety, where we know where we have communities, where we have stroads, where it is unsafe for many people to cross, where we have too many incidences of injury and death on roads, and too many of those metrics, and we're looking at the racial disparities, is disproportionately represented by Black and Indigenous people because of where those transportation infrastructure investments have been made in prioritizing cars versus safety and justice for people of all mobility types. So in terms of the equity conversation, there is a lot of work to be done for our agencies, for our plans. Outreach is one piece, but how we're thinking about outreach. Are we doing outreach just for informational purposes, for engagement purposes, or are we looking at those opportunities as a way for increasing decision-making, participation from our communities that have been most left out of those kind of decisions? I appreciate the conversation around how are we doing language justice, because so many of our transit writing public, English may not be their first language. So how we continue to invest in the kind of outreach strategies that not just increase delivery of information, but the facilitation of decision-making with and for community members. So all that to say, I want to make sure we've get to a robust conversation. I don't continue to talk about many things we can talk about, but definitely want to continue to share the resources that Front and Centered is sharing. If we have some coalition members on the call today, definitely glad to have you here. Glad for you to speak for the kind of priorities and considerations that you have. But our HEAL Progress Report 2024 is a resource for all of us to identify the gaps and, of course, the opportunities which we could do as community members, as agency members, so we can have just an equitable future. Thanks so much. I'll pass it back to you, John.
Thank you, Cameron. Really appreciate the perspective, and yeah, thank you so much for your time and everything you all are doing. Okay, let's turn it over to Charles Patton with PSRC. Are you here, Charles? Charles is the Equity Program Manager, Equity Policy and Initiatives Program Manager for Puget Sound Regional Council.
I am here, John. Nice to be with you all. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Charles Patton, Program Manager for Equity Policy and Initiatives at PSRC, as John mentioned, regional planning agency based in Seattle. On the topic of where I think we've made a decent amount of progress at PSRC, I think echoing what Alan mentioned, just creating some resources for our member jurisdictions that didn't previously exist, that they had requested of us in the past, especially as Alan mentioned, for some of our smaller jurisdictions that have smaller staff, don't have a lot of capacity, wanted to equip them with all the tools and resources necessary for them to make data-informed, best practice-informed decisions to address inequities that might exist in their backyard. And a couple examples that I'll highlight, and maybe I can share some links after I get done chatting. The equity tracker that we recently published, a public-facing dashboard that allows our members to track progress related to equity-related goals and equity-related policies, really puts community in a position to hold us accountable as we attempt to move closer to the goal of creating a region where race is less likely to influence the quality of someone's life in our region. So that's one tool that is new and that we hope will be helpful for our member jurisdictions. And we also created something we call the Legacy of Structural Racism Interactive Report. Provides an overview of structural racism specifically in the Central Puget Sound region so people can get a sense of what that history has looked like here, not only for the sake of just having a better understanding of history, but our hope is that by providing a more accurate understanding of what structural racism has looked like in the Central Puget Sound, we can help shape current and future strategies to address the root consequences of those past harms and really get a sense of where we can move the needle related to these inequities. On the topic of where I think we could do a little better, I think we can do a little better in regards to community engagement. I think we're moving in the right direction. One example of where I would like us to do more work in this space is something that we call the equity pilot for our transportation funding. We allocated $6 million to an equity focused funding competition that allowed our equity advisory committee that consists of folks from all across the region, community members, folks at CBOs, community-based organizations that are immersed in the equity space to test strategies that would explore how we can elevate transportation funding using real dollars, $6 million in funds to allocate on some innovative ideas that they came up with. And then we took the lessons learned from that $6 million pilot and lessons learned from that experience to incorporate in our full $300 million funding process. So our hope is that we can do more work like that, more innovative engagement activities that really put decision-making in the hands of community and give us a more holistic understanding about how we should be addressing the issues and barriers that communities are facing, specifically marginalized communities in our region, so that we can more effectively address the barriers that they face every day. So I'll stop there and pass it back to you, John.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you all. So we've heard some great thoughts on progress that's been made, where progress remains, and we want to hear from all of you. And so we shared these questions earlier in the presentation, as well as part of the announcement for this conversation. So hoping you all can share your thoughts on where do you think we in Washington are making the most progress. So these could be echoing what was just said. These could be new ideas. So please head on over to the Menti poll. Again, click the same link or go to menti.com and enter 85197612 and let us know where you think the state is making the most progress with respect to equity in transportation. So I will share the kind of live view of this, and I'll be able to scroll up and down as you all, and then we can have some conversation about these responses as well. So some progress on policy, absolutely. Using technology to reach more groups. Definitely the pandemic has helped people being able to access meetings at different times of day, different mediums. Collecting data, there's a wealth of data and tools available now to help inform some of these decisions. Understanding where marginalized communities are located, absolutely. Zero fare policy, right? That's a great one. HEAL Act being a good start, but so much work to do. I'd say that the environmental justice recommendations from the working group a couple of years ago also had other great ideas of beyond the HEAL Act, what the progress that needs to be made. Reviewing data. Some progress in motivated communities, but largely the progress has been made turning the huge washed-up barge around to work on projects that aren't just building highways. So does anyone want to come off mute, share thoughts on what you put in here, or react to anything that you've seen in the Menti poll? So please use the raise hand function, or just come off mute and jump in.
Yeah.
Hey, Alan.
I'll start. I think one area that DOT has been transitioning from for local planning jurisdictions or just local jurisdictions in general is getting out of their comfort area of a cookie cutter approach of planning, that different regions have different needs, different demographic needs, and being able to be more adaptable to what local jurisdictions can or can't do, and how, whether that might be considerations on statutory language to give more freedom, more flexibility to engage and improve equity access, whether again that is just outreach or whether that is funding and infrastructure. But looking past the 1990s language and really looking at technology and relationships of today, and making sure that those core guidelines are adaptable enough or are allowed to be flexible enough to give pivot room for local jurisdictions and the DOT itself, you know, in addressing the needs and the issues of today as compared to that of 30 years ago.
Thanks, Alan. Someone put in making planning funding more flexible for local jurisdictions and the local environment, not just a cookie cutter approach. So is funding more flexible now than it once was? Does anyone want to share their thoughts from a local agency perspective on you know, how you can kind of use funding flexibility to address your community concerns? Yeah, Shauna. I think you're still muted. You might be double muted because looks like I still can't hear you. Okay. And yeah, you can come back when the audio is working. While we're talking about tools, and then we'll move on to the next question. I'm going to put in the chat a link to. There was a study that the legislature, the Joint Transportation Commission, the legislature commissioned a couple years ago, that really focused on tools for equity planning for local cities. So a lot of great resources there. Definitely check that out. There's the report as well as kind of a resource library.
Before we move on.
Yeah, Nicholas.
Yeah, hi there. I wrote in the upcoming expansion of the Trouble Washington intercity bus service. I'm actually wearing multiple hats today in the phone call. One of them being a member of the study advisory group, where we're actually coming up, we're providing our input, and the powers that be are coming up with a draft plan to present to the legislature this December to expand some bus service into rural areas. When I say rural, the community I live just outside of, our grocery store does not have fresh meats, very limited produce. The closest supermarket is 60 miles round trip. Walmart or Dollar General is 100 miles round trip. So while a lot of people think a rural area might have a Dollar General just 10 miles away or something, we actually have to drive 100 miles round trip in order to get to one of those. And there's no other transportation options in our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Shauna, are you there? Still not. Okay. Well, feel free to put your thoughts in the chat if you want to. Otherwise, wait, I think I can hear you. Shauna? Okay. I muted myself. Nicholas, I'm going to put the link to the intercity bus plan in the chat. So I believe this is the study, and so those who want to get involved with that can head on over to that website. All right, so moving on to the next question. So this question is where there's still the most work to be done. So what are the biggest gaps or challenges that still need to be addressed with respect to equity in the transportation sector? The final question we'll talk about solutions and potential strategies. So where do you feel like there's the most work still to be done? If you don't see this question on your Menti poll, you may need to click a button up here in the right corner to catch up with the poll. Okay, some great ideas or big challenges here. Rural accessibility, a huge issue in large swaths of the state. Affordable housing, especially around transit, other mass transit alternatives, and I'd imagine urban areas, moving from a top down to a bottoms up community input approach to planning. Investment without displacement. That's a really good point. Something that hasn't come up yet, but if you're providing investment, new transit, new public investment in a community, are you also driving up housing costs and displacing the community? So I really like that one.
John,
Legacy.
I see Shauna's been able to add her comment to the chat. I thought you might want to just read that one real quick if you could.
Yeah, so if you can't see Shauna's chat or comment in the chat, Shauna says, having worked for a local jurisdiction, MPO, and now state, and working on equity and community engagement at all three levels, what has moved the dial more than anything else is HEAL Act policy and law, which actually allocates resources to staffing required to do this work of building relationships and evaluate our impact. So really appreciate that comment. That has allowed us to develop policies and assign funding to paying for lived experience too. So, I think maybe what's being alluded to here is compensation. So do you, in your planning efforts, are you able to compensate community-based organizations for participating in the process, whether it be stipends, and can you offer, there's issues around asking the same communities over and over again for impact, especially if it's, to Charles' point, you want it to be meaningful, but if you're going to the same communities, keeping asking them the same questions over and over again, they're experts in their community. They potentially should be compensated for their time. So let's see, we got some other ideas. Safety has come up a couple times, engagement in limited English proficient communities. So great comments in here. I won't read through all of them. Does anyone want to come off mute again and share your thoughts? I see Nicholas raising your hand.
Yeah, hi there. Time to put on a different hat, and now on behalf of La Crosse Community Pride Economic Development Association, the town of La Crosse, we sit out here in the middle of the wheat country off of Highway 26. And here, sometime in the 1970s, the highway bypassed through downtown. And so we've been trying to attract these different people off the highway through different ways, including possible upcoming business routes, since there are 3 access points to get to town. One thing that we've come across is that when we're trying to get like a level, because Highway 26 is a big east-west connector for Pullman to the west side, we were trying to get a level 3 supercharger in town to draw in these people just a couple miles off the highway into our small limited stores and cafe that we do have. only to find out that our electrical infrastructure cannot support level 3 charging. And so as we move forward in electrification, it's important that the infrastructure be built up so that these small towns, particularly along the highways, are not left behind, and we're to the point where travelers are bypassing us because they know that we can't help them with their electrical charge. And we do have the level 2 coming, which is exciting. Othello will be getting a level 3, which will help people make the trip back and forth. But currently, some people are bypassing us and going all the way down I-90 to Spokane and then down to Pullman, so they know they can have electrical. Now here I switch hats, and a little bit contradictory. Highway 230 has been overlooked since the 1940s, and it would link Ritzville to the St. John area, which would allow travelers to go across I-90 to Ritzville and then continue down to St. John and down to Pullman, which I know is contradictory to me trying to get more people, but this is another regional issue that we're experiencing. And in fact, I know that a lot of times building highways, you're going to be adding to pollution. In this case, building the highway would save on pollution by reducing the miles traveled for people traveling locally between those communities, and offering another option for people to travel down to Pullman from the west side by staying on I-90 a little bit longer. And with those two contradictory but important statements, I thank you and yield the floor back.
Thanks, Nicholas. Yeah, appreciate your perspective as always. Just highlighting that there's not a simple one size fits all, right? That's the whole purpose of the call today, is to understand that there's different solutions for different communities, and even electric vehicle charging can be an equity issue in certain areas. Even roadways and single occupant vehicles can be an equity issue for accessibility. So it's not all mass transit. And although for other competing goals of climate, we may want that to be the case. So appreciate the thoughts. Other comments on biggest challenges? Yes, Larry.
Hi there. Hope you can hear me okay. I still see all the spaces and places where decisions are being made are still filled with folks who present like me, just white folks who have master's degrees, upper middle income, and we're capable of learning, but about nuances and aspects of equity and how to improve systems and why we should, et cetera. But it's different, frankly, than enfranchising BIPOC folks and lower income folks, transit dependent folks, and having them be hired as agency staff or elected as decision-making officials. It's just different, and I see that play out at the local level, where we'll have a plan that has just like awesome equity language and good analysis of needs, et cetera, and even like even to a degree a capital plan, a multi-year capital plan. But when it comes down to the budgets, because that's don't tell me what your priorities are, show me your budgets and I'll tell you what your priorities are, as the saying goes. When it comes down to the budgets, it's a political fight, and those with political power and who are enfranchised get the dollars, and that's what makes the difference on the ground. I am glad to see, kind of offsetting that, is that we are centering, this is a little bit of a throwback to the previous question, we are centering more and more equity in grant processes, right? And I want to see it go more from you get extra points if there's equity aspects in your project, to if you don't center equity, you get no dollars. I think that's totally legit, because we have to reverse decades and decades of underinvestment in a lot of communities that are causing very real harms in people's health in terms of chronic health issues and violence on our roadways from lack of infrastructure, and people getting hit, hurt, and killed on our roadways disproportionately amongst certain populations. So it's a challenge, and I definitely recognize that, we have, I like that someone mentioned, the giant ship. It's not just washed out the agency, it's our society, because we have ingrained patterns of low density land use that creates sprawl and car dependency. It takes a long time to make changes. Even if you have the policy, you could have all the great policies lined up, but it takes a while for that to kind of spin up and create the changes on the ground in terms of middle housing being developed, and things that provide alternatives for folks and for the investments to hit the ground. I mean, even if you were handed a pile of cash to do the most equity-oriented mobility project in your community, it would still take several years of design and permitting and right-of-way acquisition. These things just take time. So it's challenging, but I'm glad. I think we're heading in a better direction. And I like that the federal government is frankly providing a lead in that. I'm proud to say that Washington, I think, is aligning with those. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. Other thoughts or comments on what you've seen in the Menti pool, what you've shared on the kind of the challenges and the gaps still to be addressed? Okay, let's move on to solutions. So this is where we really need your help. So the question is, given what you know about the WTP related to transportation, which still says climate resiliency. This should say equity. That was a copy and paste. So what equity priorities or strategies should be included in the WTP update? So here are some example strategies from the Washington Transportation Plan 2040, developing an transportation equity analysis toolkits. So I mentioned the JTC commissioned that study that looked at some of those tools. There's the health disparity map. So I think there's progress being made on the data front, expand crash data reporting and analysis at the state and local level to better provide an understanding of racial disparities in traffic safety. So these are two example strategies from the previous WTP that are in different goals, but do address equity. So please share your thoughts. Ignore the climate and resiliency comment, but what kind of new or refined strategies should we look to include in this WTP update to better address the equity challenges? Expansion of the intercity bus network. Mm-hmm. And I know kind of as part of the challenges, you were kind of alluding to some of the potential solutions. So we can kind of read between the lines as well, but definitely would love to see you kind of put some of those ideas back down, reframing them as a potential strategy if you can. Okay, some great ideas coming in. Creating a standing equity community that's compensated for their insights to help guide future work. So, I don't know the structure of PSRC's council, but that's an example of where they've got a standing group who is charged with kind of evaluating that pilot project that was mentioned, that Charles mentioned. Community-driven budgeting. It's a great idea, including goals. Specific numbers for budget spending, and then plans and policies and actions to help benefit overburdened communities. Equitable safety solution, coordinating local and regional transportation efforts to align goals. requirements for equity and EJ assessments on projects. Stop subsidizing a single occupancy vehicle. So this is around a phone app to help people interline between bus services. So maybe that's a kind of a carpooling app. I think urban versus rural divide when it comes to services. So this is, grants and technical support for community-led transportation projects. So not just funding a city to do a project, but providing the technical support to actually administer the grant to support community in developing the project concepts and implementing the projects. This is, again, similar, providing financial assistance for under-resourced communities. So it's not just the population, the neighborhoods within a city. There are cities that are lower resourced that need extra help to develop these projects. Keep them coming. This is great. And does anyone want to share their thoughts on what you see here, what you put in the Mentimeter poll? Larry, thank you.
Try to wait to see if someone else will chime in. I work with a lot of small communities and rural communities that, frankly, their public works department is 3 people, and invariably one of them gets hired away to a slightly bigger jurisdiction because they can pay whatever percentage more. And that's a third of their institutional knowledge and a third of the momentum to get stuff done. A lot of these small communities, they just don't have the capacity. They may not be aware of opportunities, let alone be able to take advantage of opportunities to apply for grants, et cetera. Or even if they do, they don't have the match funds, et cetera. So I'm glad that there are, some programs like at PSRC, there's like the Rural Town Centers and Corridor. It's like so that the little fish can swim with the little fish, right? And compete. They don't have to swim with the big fish in larger urbanized areas that are generally better resourced, not always. And like Sandy Williams' program at WashDOT is trying to do some targeted equity work. I'd love to see some more transparency there, and I know that they're working on that. But like that's my organization, Forever Green Trails. One of the things we do is provide technical capacity assistance to help local governments. But we ourselves don't prioritize between, under-resourced and communities necessarily. We just kind of look for those opportunities, but any of our local jurisdictions can utilize our services equally. So I'd like to see, we could take a look at that ourselves internally, but I'd like to just see more capacity and funding assistance for under-resourced communities, whether they're urban or rural. It sort of doesn't matter. They may have different burning issues, but I'd like to see more attention to that. I think we again, I've cited a few examples of things that I think are good programs. More of that, please.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Yeah, Nicholas? Nicholas, you're muted. Nicholas, I can't hear you. Okay, We're going to come back to you, Nicholas.
Oops, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just reading where someone expanded on my thought about the app, and that's kind of what I meant, that if we can have a single app that would help you to find your bus and then transfer like between different bus services. Say bus service A gets you so far, service B will take you the rest of the way. It'd be cool to be able to do that. Now I do know that they had a hard time just even mapping out all the existing services in the state. So this might be a Herculean task, but somehow we could tame the beast and be able to create an app to help people get where they're going intermodally throughout the state. That would be nice. Because one thing that they found while they were conducting the bus survey and public outreach for the study advisory group is a lot of people didn't even realize that some of the bus services existed. They're like, oh, the bus goes there. I didn't know the bus went there. And part of this could be we could do some increasing advertising in multiple languages. I think would definitely help. Um, and then some of these bus stops in the small towns are either like a hardware store or a grocery store, and they don't have any signage up front. The only reason that you would know a bus would be coming there is if you actually booked a ticket and it told you where to go. So it'd be really nice if we could have nice large signs at these stops that say bus in a couple of languages and then explain the times that it comes rolling through. We might be able to increase some ridership both through advertisement and an app, in 3 ways: advertisement and app, and through better signage. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicholas. Yeah, I think there's been a desire or a lot of talk about mobility as a service, and I think there may be new names for it now, but really having that one app to sort of be able to find out all of your travel options and then maybe even book it and pay for it. So I think different states are, California is looking at an integrative kind of fare payment where all of the services can be kind of integrated and you can have seamless transfers, but getting to that point where you can just pull up your phone and know. You can do it on Google Maps, but it's not always perfect and it's not always real time, but being able to sort of understand all the different services would be fantastic. Other thoughts? Well, there's certainly a lot of here for us to digest. We're going to pull out all of these responses and review them and really kind of collate them and really understand what you all have shared. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join today to enter all of these great comments, both in the Menti poll and as well as the chat. So we have we're going to let you out early. We do have one final question that I'll put in the background as we wrap up, and we can stick around if you want to keep chatting. But the final question is just anything else you want to share about equity that can help shape the WTP. So you can advance to that question, Maddie. And please feel free to we'll keep this poll question open for a few minutes so you can add additional thoughts at your leisure. Are we at that question yet? Let's see, maybe I need to refresh. Okay, we're going to get to that question. At least I can't see it yet. But if there's any other thought you want to, any other comments you want to share about equity to help shape this conversation with the WTP, please put it in there. You can also contact me and Paula. I'll show you those email addresses. So just really quickly on the next steps, this is the fourth and final topic focus workshop. You can go to the Washington Transportation Plan website on the Commission website and view previous recordings. I think just the climate and resiliency is posted at the moment, but the rest of them will be posted soon. We're going to be distilling all this information, developing new and refined strategies to share with you all. We're going to vet them with the legislature as well as other state agencies this fall, and come back for feedback on those recommended strategies in early 2025. So look out for additional emails from us and opportunities to review what we put together in early next year. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any other comments, you can email me or Paula, and go to this website and provide comments there. In closing,
if you didn't get a chance to enter your thoughts today and any of the questions, please feel free to email them to us. We really appreciate any and all feedback.
okay, so I'm going to say thank you, and I think we still do not have that final question up on the code. Let me just check.
If
Okay,
you
so you can,
enter it, yeah, if you enter it in Menti, we'll get the information, even if
yes.
yeah.
So please keep providing your feedback if you have additional thoughts, or feel free to contact us. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you especially to Cameron, to Charles, to Alan for sharing your thoughts, and really appreciate everyone joining us today. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.